Name and address for the record.
I'm going to try to amend a lot of this and shorten it down, but I just
Can you still
wanted
do
to...
name and address for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes,
My
we
name
do.
is Ann Whittier. I live at 10 River Street. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. When I studied urban planning at Salem State, I learned that the width of a street and the scale of the buildings were paramount in determining the quality of life and the neighborly feelings that developed on a street. The small scale of River and Beckford streets make it easy to become neighborly, to know who might be ill and need soup, who might lend a ladder, where to go for a cup of sugar. We have learned in the 30 years since my husband built our house on River Street, by himself, by hand, how important it is to have good neighbors and be a good neighbor. I've heard members of our city government contend that F.W. Webb is a good neighbor, that their development is a good plan for the city. And while I have nothing but respect for F.W. Webb as a successful company, I do not agree with that contention. A good neighbor does not debase the hard work and preservation efforts of its neighbors. A good neighbor is considerate of the peace, privacy, and property values of its neighbors. My property value is slated, if this development goes in, is slated to plunge by a minimum of $65,000. And I should be embarrassed to say this, but that's more than I make in 2 years. Now, when my city government asks me to accept this, a good neighbor doesn't rumble noisy vehicles by, doesn't dig up. You've heard all that. I've heard it said that in opposing the plan, we're elitists. Well, for 30 years, we've lived across the fence from an auto repair shop, looked at a rusty billboard, put up with a train idling all night for several nights in a row on summer nights when our house is filled up with diesel. But that's life. For months, we stumbled around blindly because misaligned lights were put into the Leslie's Retreat Park that pointed right into our bedroom windows and onto our porches. I hear it said that the residents of River Street and Beckford Street want the city to provide them with a parking lot. We don't use that parking lot. What we want the city to provide is a promise that capped contaminants that lie beneath the soil will not be dredged up again and sent off on the breeze through the windows of our littlest neighbors. I've heard it said that in opposing this plan, we're NIMBYs. Well, you know what? I'll accept that. This planned development will be in my backyard. This planned outside pipe storage area with its attendant forklifts and clanking bedlam is less than 11 yards from the rear wall of my house. It's 9 yards from the porch where my husband and I like to sit after work and enjoy a glass of wine. I wonder, is this what we worked for so hard all these years? Is this why my husband, when he built our house in River Street, towed the line for the rules and regulations of not only R2 zoning, but the historic district rules and regulations? He redesigned the roof line so it would look more compatible. We had to re-pour the foundation so we would have the proper alignment with the sidewalk at the time. Like Dan said, I thought, oh my God. Now I realize, yes, because it made a streetscape like you saw in that image that frankly I think is beautiful. In the meantime, we did all that other stuff with the North River Canal Corridor, and now we're ready to retire, but the city doesn't seem to want to give us the peace that I think we deserve after all this. I've been in Salem for 45 years, but I grew up in Marblehead, and I'll tell you this, Marbleheaders are appreciative of what they have. They respect their town, and they preserve its integrity with grit and determination. While Salem's fabulous history and outstanding architecture is constantly at risk from unsound planning, our city government is ready to give spot zoning for a development in the wrong place. I believe F.W. Webb should move away from this historic floodplain to higher ground elsewhere in the city where it can settle permanently into a proper and properly zoned district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whittier. Anybody else?